All right, new year. How's everybody doing?
Pretty good.
Uh,
Pretty good. Got
so
my
so
gray
far,
sweatshirt
good.
on. It's not black, so you can still see the beard. Rollo was the one that brought it up to me. They're in chat, so I'm just pointing it out.
Oh my God, that's so weird. You're gray. I'm wearing black, and Anthony's got what is that? It's black,
Black
but
and
Black
blue.
or
Yeah,
yeah,
UPS. Okay,
we're
yeah,
fancy.
from back in the day.
we did not
Yes,
plan
I
this.
carry my colors with me everywhere I go. You know,
that's right.
You do.
You have them installed directly into the flesh.
I'm gonna start getting RGB tattoos. It'd be freaking awesome. Can't wait till they
I'm sure
figure that
somebody
one
already
out.
thought of it, but we need the Q codes so you can
Like,
scan and find important things.
yeah, actually, I did a 3D print. I don't have a copy here. I made a lighter sleeve for my. You know how they have like just like a Bic lighter. I printed a sleeve that goes over it for my neighbor, and because we were outside talking one time at one of our fire pits, and we were talking about things I could print. I'm like, I've never printed a lighter sleeve, but I can, I guess. So I made him one that has a QR code on the back, and when you scan it, his name's Aaron, and it says, "For a good time, call Aaron," and it put his phone number. So he didn't
Wow.
realize till after he scanned it what it said, but
All
he
right,
thought it
you
was
then.
pretty funny. It's like, yes, using my powers for good and evil. You know.
So, all of you who are live right now, and especially all of you who are on the YouTube seeing this later, clearly we're here and we're completely derailed. So,
Always.
this is gonna be a great night. So, the man with the beard, O'Grady, he's our software engineer. Lee is the DBA. I'm the data engineer, and like I said, we're completely off the rails. So, let's kick it off.
Say, to get
So
back on topic tonight, we're going to talk
maybe
about Lee brought us in a topic today.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about three of your favorite tech features, or just what are your favorite tech features or feature sets, or it could even just be a piece of software that you really like. And so that's that's kind of going to be tonight's topic.
I like this
So
one too
welcome.
because it really
Just wanna,
does open up
holla
to
at.
all ages, like,
Sorry.
or not all ages, all fields, like experience levels. That's what I was thinking of. I was thinking of like age.
I wanted to
What's
say
your
hi to
age
Rala
in
real
your
quick.
field?
oh yes, hey Rala.
We got a new follower, so
Rala's a bud. It'll open up to people like Rala, who may not be, programming savvy, but anybody can say what's your favorite technology, and at this point in life, everybody can be like, well, I like this about this application. That's
I like that I can pick up my Switch and play it personally without hogging a TV.
Yeah.
Anyone can say that, right? I have a Switch now, by the way.
Conejo.
Again, I'm dear.
What's up, bud? Dunce is here. Yeah, we got all the buds.
We got people rolling in. Nice.
Yeah, we have a new person in the chat as well.
Yeah, that's Cone. He's a character.
Is he now?
He's a
Okay.
good guy.
Like
Smart guy,
NBC,
too.
characters welcome, or is it USA? I don't know. Characters welcome, whatever.
Yes. They could be from DC or Marvel. We're inclusive.
Well, just kidding.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, we're gonna get
Features.
into our favorite features. Salty, how's it going, man? Favorite features of any technology that you've used. At least that's the way I'm interpreting it, Lee. So pretty much anything, any software or hardware, I guess, that uses technology that you guys or that we or chat finds to be the coolest. So while we're discussing that, chat, make sure you throw in some of your favorite technologies or features of an application, or favorite applications altogether. What's the most useful for you? What gets you through your day sometimes? So
Yeah, for sure. You can put them in the chat, or there's also a Discord where we can talk. So I'm going to give you two of the three up front, and I'm saving the third because I know that it's going to create, I have a feeling it's going to create some discussion. some
Is this more geared toward Anthony because it's like a sequel type thing, or is this just a?
Oh, don't
these
Am I
spoil
gonna
it.
feel this pain? Is the question.
well, these are all SQL because that's what I do at SQL
Yeah.
Server. So that's where I gravitated to. This is something that's been in the news very heavily. So
Zombies.
it'll make sense when I tell you what it is. You'll be like, oh, obviously. Uh, but so my first one is always on availability groups, and then my other feature that I really like is SQL Server Temporal Tables. And
It makes me
availability
feel
groups,
really good, real fast, that I know about both of those.
yes, you do.
That
All
makes me
three of
feel
us
like
do.
I know what's going on.
um, so always on availability groups is built on Windows failover clustering. And so, what that is just a installation of a feature on a Windows or at least two Windows servers to get those Windows machines to cooperate to provide a service. And so it provides high availability. If one machine goes down, then the other one is there to provide whatever service. It could be a file server, it could be a number of things. For me, it's SQL Server. So you can create a failover cluster instance for SQL Server, but this feature also is used for availability groups. And I like availability groups for a number of reasons. I think the biggest reason is that it provides built-in disaster recovery, which I find most companies just don't have, or they're doing it very poorly because they don't have the right elements in place, or they only have some of their systems highly available, and maybe they have no disaster recovery. I've been at a few places where I want to make the SQL Server highly available and disaster recovery ready, and I get shut down or pushed to the side because the rest of the company isn't ready for that. Like, yeah, well, your SQL servers might be up, but the web servers and none of that other stuff have any kind of high availability. Like, well, this would be a good time to get some, then, wouldn't it? So, availability groups, I think, solve a lot of problems that, at least with data uptime, because unlike like replication, for example, transactional replication in SQL Server, first of all, it has an army of SQL Server agents that have to be running all the time, and it tends to break and be a bit finicky. And you actually have to have GASP primary keys on all your tables. And I've seen databases in the wild, and a lot of
Never
them
heard of
don't even
those.
meet that basic requirement. You don't have to have that with availability groups.
I
So
think I've brought you some tables before that don't meet those basic requirements when you first started working with me.
maybe so.
Like
But
primary
I
keys.
really am.
You don't need those.
I'm surprised at the tables out there that they don't have primary keys, and there's bunches of them in databases. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
why? Unless my opinion is your tables need primary keys unless they're like a staging table where you're inserting data in there to move it somewhere else.
I'd almost take that one level deeper and say it has to be like, and I mean, it's literally a temporary table. Like, because there's staging tables that are permanently there. In that case, if they're always going to be there, you might want to eat the overhead of, primary
It
key.
could be useful.
It should not be a hash, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But for availability groups, you don't have to have that. There's no requirement for primary keys. There's not an army of SQL Server agent jobs that you have to learn and figure out what they do, and they have special permissions and all this headache stuff. It's not to say that availability groups are don't have complexity. They absolutely do. And in order to use availability groups, not only do you need a DBA that understands them, you really need other IT team members who understand things like Windows Server failover clustering. They've put it together before, they know how to maintain it, they know how to troubleshoot it when it breaks. You need good networking people. So it's not just something that you should just go out and try to implement just because you as the DBA like that feature or you want to try to use it. You need to look around and think about whether you have the right support staff around you to allow that to even be something you can do. So that's availability groups. Um,
Super useful for coming from outside of the DBA world. Whenever you explained it to me the first time when we were working together about them, and just the overall concept of them just makes sense, which is, I feel, a definitive part of if a technology is very useful, if you hear about it and you're like, that makes sense. Like, why isn't that
yeah,
already
Yeah,
just
if
how it works? You're like, well, it does if you do it right. Okay.
if you don't have to get talked into it, right? If somebody
Yeah,
tells you like
yeah.
it's good at X, and you're like, well, I want some of that in my life.
Or if someone's
Yeah.
trying to talk you into it, and you're like, I like, why? You ever been in those conversations where someone's really trying to push something on you, and they had you from like the first sentence, and you're like, you can stop. We can do that. That's fine.
yeah,
You had me at high availability.
Yeah, like you had me at failover. Like, okay.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's automatic failover in this feature. So if something goes wrong with one of the computers involved, then it just fails over to the other SQL server, and it takes like 10 seconds. And if this will be a software engineering question. If your application has good retry abilities, you won't even notice those 10 seconds.
True.
Agreed. If a failover is a problem, then I would, well, if it's a sub-minute and there's a failover and it causes a problem with the app, then you should reevaluate how it talks to the database. Like it should be able to have a hiccup, you know?
Yeah, it should. Um, so yeah, that's availability groups quickly from me, and then temporal tables.
Mm-hmm.
So temporal tables were interesting because I didn't have, I guess I should say maybe I didn't have the opportunity or yeah, I guess the opportunity is the right word, to really learn triggers in SQL Server. So triggers are, you can do, I think it's insert after, trying to think
Sure.
about this. There's an after. Anthony probably knows this better than I do.
There's a yeah, I messed with these. I
There's
think with
after
Anthony
or
actually
instead.
last time I messed with them.
Yeah, so you
Yeah,
could
you can do
have
like a
it.
replace before.
Yeah, so instead of or after, basically.
Yeah,
Instead of or after, that's right.
instead of. That's what
So
I was thinking. Like it's the one that
so if
does
you're
it.
going to insert a row, a trigger might intercept that statement and do something instead of whatever the initial SQL statement was going to do. Or if you, once you do insert something, you might have an after trigger that says, okay, now go do this stuff. And, but you can use triggers to capture data and do auditing and logging inside your tables. So that's another thing that you can do with those triggers. However, there are design considerations with triggers that you really need to think about. I've been bitten several times by the fact that some activity was happening inside of a database, and no one knew why. Like, where's this coming from? And after much, what I'll say, weeping and gnashing of teeth, we found, somebody said, "Oh, maybe there's a trigger on the table." We're like, triggers, yes, okay. So we go look, and sure enough, there's a trigger doing whatever it was we were trying to figure out.
Yeah, not to derail, but that's one of the things that was one of the many reasons why I'm not a fan of triggers. Like
They hide.
yeah, like they're useful in what they're supposed to
Mhm.
do, but they end up, and this is just my opinion. I don't know how many other people feel this way, but I feel that they end up
Bite you.
causing pain later because they're like seemingly invisible unless you're doing very specific things, and only people who will notice or catch it are on the more on Lee's side of the scale and less on O'Grady's side of the scale, right? Developers, if they haven't seen this application before, may not even think to check for triggers when they're doing what
Yeah.
they're doing in SQL.
The only reason I know
Yeah.
to check for triggers is due to pain points of the past. So
Stubbed your toe because me and you used to work in an environment with a lot of triggers.
Yep.
Yeah.
and that's like
Yeah.
whenever I'm looking for a table, and it always ended up being a view. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah.
The only reason I know to check views is because it it's haunted me before for hours trying to find a damn table. Because a lot of companies, like ones we worked for, have how many tables did we have? Do you know? Did you ever get a count? Is there?
Too
No,
many.
but it's going to be a
A
four
lot.
digit number,
I would say
not more.
you think 100,000, if not more.
I don't know. If we're just talking about like applications and not like every single database that exists in the environment, then I don't
I was
think
talking
so.
about every table that exists on that.
Then maybe. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
it could
possible.
be.
So for those that don't know, in chat or maybe you guys, when a software developer or software engineer goes in and tries to find a specific table to change, there's two different ways. There's I'm looking through the program. I can look through the source code and see where the table's actually connecting to, and then I can go to that table and find it. Or if you don't if you don't feel like doing that, you can use your brain and like try to use your memory and try to find the table because you've been in there before. So you're like, oh, I know it's on this server somewhere, and then you realize there's thousands of tables, and then all of a sudden you're going through and you've scrolled through thousands of tables and realize it's a view. So that's where I was at.
Oh man. So there's a third way. If you learn well, across
DMVs.
platforms, it would be
I was going to
information
say, besides the call
tables.
that I make in SQL to look for a table that's also in SQL, I do have that way as well.
Yes, yeah, that's where I was headed. There's cross-platform. There's information schema tables inside SQL Server. There's the system tables, so SYS dot tables or SYS dot objects and other things that you can like search for, which are great if you remember only part of the table name. You can also filter inside, like if you right-click the tables folder, you can filter and put in there you're after, and it'll show you all the tables that have that in them.
And for those of you who are listening, and we're basically talking about SQL Server Management Studio (SSMS).
Yes.
A lot of databases out there. The tools apply similar, but we kind of just went specific because I think that's probably what the three of us use the most often.
I mean, like,
Yeah,
unless you
yeah,
really
for
want to
sure.
talk about how annoying triggers are, we could talk about the AS400 DB2. I am IBM DB2. Every time
Yeah,
you
they
update a
have 'em too.
trigger, you have to update everything that trigger touches.
You have to recompile
The entire
everything.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the whole library or if it's like system wide, but
I remember that every time I messed with a trigger on the AS400, it ended up being a lot more of work for people, not me, because I wasn't the one that did that stuff. So it ended up being more work for the team that was in charge of the AS400.
Yeah.
I'm like, sorry guys, but it has to be done. So
Yeah, I was blocked by that numerous times. If you do that, then we have to recompile all these applications. Like, I guess we're not doing it then.
that was my
Entire
solution.
projects.
Usually, I'm like, well, we're gonna find a different way to do that.
I've seen entire projects usually they get halted because like we don't want the downtime.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And all this to say, we were talking about temporal tables, and one of the benefits is you could do certain things without triggers. And look, we just spent 20 minutes talking about the problems with triggers. So that's one of the reasons why I bet it's a good feature.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have a lot of the drawbacks of triggers. First of all, it's not hidden. So Grady mentioned, and Anthony, you seconded that part of the problem with triggers is that they're hidden. They do things behind the scenes, and you don't really think about them.
Mhm.
Like if you're in an application like SQL Server Management Studio, you don't readily see them. So that's one advantage. Temporal tables are easily spottable inside the user interface for SQL Server Management Studio. And the other thing is they don't do things they don't start additional transactions. So when you do an insert to a, a, a source table or a system versioned table, what goes into the history table isn't like a separate transaction that has to be managed like it is with triggers, where you have with triggers, you could have like this domino effect of transactions that all have to work.
Whether it's positive or not, good or bad,
Right.
it's going to be a domino effect. Or you can have that domino effect, yeah.
And then Cone is asking, how much of an issue is it to have downtime for a server to either reconstruct stuff or fix bugs and making it work suboptimally? Who wants to jump on that first?
I can jump on that from the programming side, because I'm sure we have two different looks, views on this. So from the engineering side, we never use the word never is what we never do. We are not supposed to take down any servers that are being occupied without having a backup server that will either transfer everybody that's currently on the server to a new one. We call that load balancing. So for simplistic, well, you have two servers, then you have a load balancer, and it's saying, half of you, or depending on how you set it up, but again, simplicity says half of you go here to this server, half of you are going to this server. So what happens is, once you want to do a deployment, and I want to put new code on the server, I can do one server at a time, and then that one will be up, and then I'll do we call it blue and green. So we'll do blue server, then green server. And that way, at all times, there's an active server that's available. It's either the old one while we're updating the new one, or once it's updated and we're working on the second old one, it'll go to the newer version that we just put out there. So it's always going to be an active server out there. Now, I, again, don't like to say never, because at times, certain bugs, if we get them out there, we put them on the servers, and they don't present themselves until, a week later. Let's say there's a job that's supposed to run once a week, and that job runs and messes up our servers. We don't have applications. In that case, we do a swarming event. So at least, again, my personal experience, we go, we get all the developers on the team, we swarm, meaning we're all on a call. We get the servers back up to begin with first. So once we get those servers, usually what it involves is just redeploying the previous deployment, because we know that one was working at one point. So once we get that back out there, we don't touch the prod servers and the production servers anymore. We do all of our coding on the other times on, let's see, we have local, so that's my PC running its own server. Then we have dev, which is pointing to dev SQL servers or Mongo servers or whatever you're using. Not live data, so that way you're not really interacting or messing anybody up if you do change something or break something. Then we have a UAT table environment, which is for user acceptance testing. And that's whenever we get some software finished, it goes over there, and that's for testing, making sure that it almost mirrors production. It's very close. A couple little differences just to keep it safer, I guess. But ideally, once you deploy to UAT server, it's good to go to prod server. So then we go to production staging and have a server for that. We test it again, and then we go to production.
So basically, yes, Cone. He just asked. So you're basically doing copies, and the scenario that
Yep.
I already just point out, that's 100%.
Yep.
You should. Most organizations, especially modern ones, abhor downtime. You hear 5, 6, 9, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be up. Our downtime this year was measured in seconds.
Yep.
Now, whether or not people do that or not, i.e., what happened to AWS a couple of times last month. So,
yeah. Say technically our downtime's a little longer this year because AWS kept going down. So
I don't
count that.
Buck, like it's AWS is down. What are we gonna do?
That was literally all of us sitting at it was a couple weeks ago or last week. AWS crashed hard, and we're all like, we can't.
The 22nd.
Yeah, and we're like, we can't do anything. And they're like, well, we need to fix it. We're like, we can't fix it. So
yeah.
Yeah, everybody, like
Um,
all across the country, everyone's sitting there like, I don't, I can't, like I can fix most things on a computer, but like that's not.
I can't
Yeah.
I can't fix AWS.
Can't just fix the server. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could we admit that it's outside of all of our pay grades?
I
Maybe
will say
combined.
that
Absolutely.
not everybody actually understands that. So
Yeah.
when you have people in the company asking, why is it still down, and we're like, that's a good question.
Because it's out of our control.
Yeah.
To respond to Cohen one more time, he says, "Yeah, that's a lot of copies to use at one time. It is. So, like in my environment, we have, um, depending on which stack we're talking about, we have AGs, availability groups, like Lee was talking about, and there'll be a primary, a secondary, and a third one. And then you go to the next environment. Let's say it's QA, and then you have primary and at least a
Mhm.
secondary. And then if you're doing it the right way, in quotes, if you're making every environment match, can you imagine having 3 in prod, 3 in QA, 3 in dev, 3 in UAT, 3 in staging?
Yeah.
There's a lot of duplication there, and you just have to have the manpower, the resources, and the backing to do it.
Well, and now
Um,
a lot of these are virtual machines as well, Cone. So they're
Sure.
it's not like we have a room
That's true.
full of servers that we have to have like one just for this, one just for it's literally all on the same. A lot of them are all in the same box. So it's like we're just tapping into the resources.
Yeah, like VMware, you can
Mhm.
do it with Hyper-V as well. But you usually have like 2 hosts as a minimum. And then if you're doing something like an availability group with, I'm just going to keep it simple, 2 hosts
Yeah.
or 2 guests, then each guest goes on an individual host, so that if a host goes down, the availability group, if it's set up correctly, will automatically fail over, and you'll get that 10 or 15 seconds of not being able to reach the database, and then it'll be back up, and then your applications will be able to connect.
And
Um,
like Lee was saying earlier, the downtime in between you won't even notice because from my side we have timeouts set up, and if you're down for 15 seconds, very rarely do I have a timeout set up to say at 15 seconds just fail. It'll say try again. Like if we have a lot of like they're really quick, so it's like they try again until they succeed, or try again for 10 times. If it fails, then put up a failure page. Um, so in that
yeah,
process, let's say I do a call to the server. Well, Lee's doing a failover. It's down for 10 seconds. Okay, well, once my timeout's done, it's going to try again anyway. And that's going to be when the server's back up. So you won't even notice when they are down.
yeah. And a lot of this cone depends on, how business critical is your application. What are you doing? Are you serving high volume NASDAQ transactions? Then you
Yeah,
probably can't be down ever.
ever.
it's true.
Are you keeping medical data that has to be accessible 24/7 because nurses need it? Then you can't be down ever.
Or you schedule maintenance periods well in
Yeah,
advance and say, hey, we're going to be down this Saturday between 8 and 9, usually late at night. Um,
yeah,
so that way you can, alleviate most of the people being on.
yeah. You give those people a chance to implement some other protocol while the computers are being worked on.
Yeah.
But if you're just, it's hard for me to think of like non-emergency things because I've worked most of my life in
Yeah, because we're working
emergency companies.
critical
But
infrastructures.
It's,
Yeah.
it's kind of your bread and butter, right?
it is because before I've worked at physical security companies, so like ADT, think ADT, only smaller, and other scenarios like that. But like if you were doing service dispatch, I don't know, maybe your company has service technicians.
Yep.
That's not as critical. If you can't schedule technicians for 30 minutes,
Yeah, it's not
is
going
there
to be that
really a
big of a deal.
problem?
Hmm.
I would say no.
I mean,
Um,
now you'll have a problem as far as or I guess a perceived problem as far as losing money, as the company wise. But is anybody actually going to have that big of an issue with it. Usually not.
Right.
At the same time, it's I don't know how to say this, but like
We've all
we
called in
tell
somewhere
them,
and
like we tell them it's going to happen. They don't have an option. Like it's like we have
Right.
to shut down the company, this server for.
up and put up that purple screen, and then
Everybody still here? You guys hear me? Okay.
I can hear you.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah, we
we're
can.
back.
So we,
Yeah, so we had. I never have internet. Like I have the best internet, I feel like, and I never have issues until.
do we live stream?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna end up with 2 videos, but that's okay. So we were talking about availability and high availability, and Cone's question about having duplicate copies of data or whatever.
Mhm.
And so yeah, that's where we were.
Yeah, I'm saying
Um,
something. I don't
so
remember.
uh,
Ironically, you were talking about downtime, and then I made
yeah,
a joke.
Oh yeah, talking about downtime.
And you
They're
went
like,
no
down.
one heard it. No one heard the joke, so we can say it was a glorious
Perfect.
joke. It was
Oh,
a
wait.
hilarious joke about you having your own downtime and you need to reboot. So
That's right. That's
and
right.
then the internet just have to believe that it was one of the better jokes. This is a tribute to that joke.
There you
That's
go.
right.
We
Song
were just
reference.
we were
Anyway,
just proving that downtime doesn't kill anyone. It just is annoying.
That's
you know?
that's it. That's what we were talking about. Is uh, how what you choose for an availability solution and a disaster recovery solution depends on how critical your application is. You know, if you're doing something like ADT, where you're doing physical security, responding to people who, you know, are having burglary alarms or fire alarms, and you're talking to um, AHJs, those are authorities having jurisdiction,
Oh.
police, fire, medical. It's important that your application basically never goes down.
Yeah.
If you're dispatching service technicians, you could work around some downtime. That's no one's life is at stake if you can't schedule a technician for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So
and we are back up, right, guys? My moderator screen is not showing anything.
Yes. Yes, we are.
yeah, we're up.
Okay.
You might need to refresh. But the
Ah,
example
So
is like I have a call that's about getting leads. So we get leads, they get sent out to the company, to the people to use, whatever. If get leads is down, it's not the end of the world. They have secondary options of how to get leads. We have a manual get leads that goes to a different, a different API that we can be like, okay, well, you have to do this manually for the next 30 minutes. Just click it instead of automatically getting one.
Right. Right. So we circled back to talking about the availability groups feature because of Cone's question, which is perfectly fine. Put your
awesome.
questions
Yeah.
in there. We were talking about temporal tables, and then I was contrasting those to triggers, and then we ended up talking about the world of triggers and why we don't like them. But a temporal table, I feel like, besides the fact that it's not hidden like a trigger, excuse me, temporal tables to me are just easier to set up. And so that's another reason that I like them. They are great at capturing what happened to a table. So they're great at capturing oops changes to tables, as well as, I mean, they capture all kinds of changes, but like if you're trying to protect the table from that one person who you're a little scared about the fact that they have access to the table,
Yeah.
Temporal Tables is a great way to do that. So check out Temporal Tables. We've used them. The three of us have used them in the environment that we all used to work at together. I
Setting up.
haven't used them at my new job, but there's a business case. I just haven't implemented it yet.
I think maybe we should also at some point get into the discussion of having access when you're scared that people have access, and at what point access should not be allowed if you don't meet the requirements of knowing how to properly use it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
agreed.
certainly something to talk about.
Or, maybe levels of access you can give to someone that wouldn't break stuff.
For sure.
Again, this is stuff we've talked about in the past, but yeah, maybe we'll talk about that next week.
Yeah.
Security
and like temporal tape, or I'm sorry, like triggers, when they log changes, you can use the data that's in the history table of a temporal table setup to actually recover changes. So if someone accidentally deletes 100,000 rows, temporal tables will save those rows. It gives you a before and an after. It gives you essentially a version history. So between this time and this time, the row looked like this. And that's what you get from temporal tables. So it really is a nice feature that allows you to recover when something unexpected happens to your data.
And to really sell it to those who are listening, because I know there's a few people who seem to be like the business analyst type and use Excel. Imagine if your favorite Excel sheet remembered everything you did, and you can, after you make changes, you can just flip over to another tab and see everything you've done today. I'm kind of like, Control Z, and you see it. And an added benefit, and I don't think you mentioned this yet, Lee, is not only can you just see the changes that happen, but you can literally query the table of point in time. So you can say, I want to see what this day looked like last Thursday at 2:30.
Yep.
And then you can see exactly what it looked like. And for me, that's kind of like the killer feature for that, because I mean, I end up using it in interesting ways all the time. And sometimes interesting is bad, but there's plenty of times where I've needed to track changes, but there's no guarantee on the how often you'll look. Maybe it's a requirement that it's adaptable where it checks every 5 minutes, and during heavy load it'll step to be more like 15, so on and so forth. And I use last time checked as a parameter in that process to say, hey, okay, we checked on this half an hour ago, or maybe to piggyback the conversation we just had, there was an outage. We haven't looked at this in an hour and 15 minutes. It'll look back what it looked like a few minutes ago, and now we can see the difference between now and then, and track changes. So that's one of my favorite features of the feature you're talking about.
Yeah. You could use it for tracking changes to quantities. Like if you had an inventory system, for example, as your quantity changes, as maybe you have stuff that comes into your dock, into your warehouse, and you sift through it, and some of it is broken or whatever, so you reject it. All of that stuff gets entered, and all those changes gets entered into a database, and you can track what happened to that data over time. So that's another interesting thing that you can do with it. It works for sales as well, that sort of thing. So it really, the feature has a lot of uses. So that's why it's kind of become one of my favorite kind of features. So the last thing isn't a feature. It's more of a tech. It's a piece of software. Actually, it's two pieces of software made by a certain company that I'll name in a second. So I love monitoring. And so I've touched a number of monitoring softwares in the past, like AppDynamics, Dynatrace, those kinds of things. I love metrics. I like to be able to look at a screen and see what's happening inside the SQL Server, or how an application is talking to the SQL Server, that sort of thing.
I like graphs as well.
Yes, pretty graphs.
Grafana graphs.
So these two pieces of software are SolarWinds Server and Application Monitoring and Database Performance Analyzer.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that SolarWinds gets beat up probably daily these days because of what happened to them.
Yeah.
Honestly, guys, I think we should probably just get over it because so many companies get hacked,
Oh yeah.
they don't even know it.
Twitch just got hacked a couple months ago, and
Oh, really?
they leaked all their source data. Or
Ouch.
not their. I don't think it was the. I don't know if it was any user data, but I know they leaked their source code on how their application works.
Yeah.
Does anybody remember when the movie industry got hacked and a whole bunch of salaries went out, and that made a lot of people angry?
Oh, that was the
No,
other
I don't.
thing that they
That's
got from
interesting.
Twitter
Yeah.
was or from Twitch was the uh the payment algorithm.
How much some people are making?
Like how much people and someone in chat might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was how much people were making or how much how the
Yeah.
how the money was
Cone
being
says
made, which is
Cone
such a
says how
weird
much money they're
thing
making.
that it had to be
Yeah.
hacked to figure out how much each thing was like. It's because there's an algorithm that tells you how much you're getting paid. It's like so much per sub, so much per. I think there's the
Well, is there anybody out there who has like
bits.
sweetheart deals where they get something other than what the algorithm normally
Yes.
would do? Because I could see that pissing people off.
Yeah, I think whenever you get up to a certain
Yeah.
level, you can negotiate different terms.
And then so if you're not able to negotiate, just like in the regular business world, right? It's Twitch is a business, YouTube's a business, right? So let's
Yeah.
like in the regular business world, you know, Lee might have negotiated a great package when he hired on, and I didn't do so good. And then if that information leaked and I realize hand over foot he's making a huge more amount than me and he has like 17 weeks off, I could be really upset about that. Like, why wouldn't you let me get away with that? Because you're not worth as much. Oh, but
But you didn't bargain as hard.
you
Yeah.
try hard enough.
Yeah.
So
which
yeah,
is
so,
which does bring up the point that that we've talked about before, that salary should be talked about more. When you're in the same field as people that are doing the same job as you, especially, I don't think it only benefits a company to not talk about your salary.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. So SolarWinds, I don't want to make it sound like the hack was no big deal because that would be false.
Yeah.
What I mean is that despite the fact that it was a bad hack in the sense that SolarWinds is a big company and it apparently touched a lot of government entities.
Mm-hmm.
So from that perspective, it's horrible. It is absolutely bad that it occurred. Companies get hacked all the time, and they hopefully do their best to protect against such things. And obviously, some companies are better at it than others. But just because SolarWinds got hacked doesn't mean that, in my opinion, doesn't mean that you just throw out their products and never use them again. Now, people on YouTube may think that's horrible when you watch this and you hear me say that. Everybody can have their own opinion. That's
Should
mine.
I take the opposite stance just in case
I
people are
can
watching?
take the opposite stance, and it won't be just in case. I can do a devil's advocate.
Sure.
So okay, so if you're in a leadership position in IT,
Mhm.
and you got directors, C-level people, or whatever, and they're like, this just happened, what are we going to do about it? Sometimes you have to put forward a plan, right? You may realize, you could have the same mindset as Lee has here and say, well, I mean, this happens, right? That's why we have X many security analysts and directors and whoever keeping us safe, because the problem's real and it's out there. But even though you realize that, you have to put forward a plan. And also, this is the first time in recent history that it happened with this particular company. So you got it COA, right? CYA. Anyway,
CYA.
depends. Well, cover R, but anyway.
C
Um,
Yes.
so
CE
you,
everyone's.
yeah, you gotta take care of yourself and your team by protecting them by saying, hey, we're gonna switch companies because we need to uh go over someone who hopefully has better practices. And I now that I'm saying that out loud, I'm not. Who knows what the practices were? Like
Yeah.
again, to Lee's
It could have
point,
been. It could have been to gold standards, but
right?
you know.
But you're in a room with C level people, and they're like, we had software on hundreds of machines
Mhm.
that had access on the machines, or however you would like me to word it, and more than once was a blip on the radar.
Yeah.
And normally they don't see the
Yeah.
blips. So
Yeah, they
normally
see
you
the
don't.
news article. That
and
says,
they're
Right.
C-level buddies, and
Mhm.
they're other people see it. Hey, do you have some of that at your work? And they'll
you're like, yeah, and then yeah, I can see that, especially
yeah,
coming from a non-technical viewpoint as a management or C-levels, like you're saying, is they'll look at it and be like, we do have that. I saw it on the news. We need to get rid of that because there's a
right.
lot of knee-jerk reaction in IT. Not from us usually.
Lee's
So,
I
suggesting
have
that
a
he has
question here.
knee-jerk reactions.
So
So I was
you're
like, are
gonna
you
get
saying you
rid
have them or?
you're gonna get rid of all your code that isn't securely written?
Oh, I'm not saying it's
To that person,
good.
I'm about to say something they won't like.
So I want to say
I
was
quit.
the person
That's
you're
what I would
talking
say.
to, the person you're talking to, did they put their did insecure code put you in the news? Right.
I say
I
that again.
mean,
It's like you
So
like as in the
saying that like, well, it's unfair to pick on a company who's been hacked once or twice when it can happen to your code too.
yeah.
Um,
But then if it does,
this your stuff's not on the news, but theirs is. And again, you're having a conversation with the people who decide your career progression and
Yeah.
what you make
and your paycheck.
Yeah.
how much funding
I get
your
that.
department or team gets.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
mean,
as you were
Cone,
saying,
I agree with you, Cone. There, that the facade we do put on is that we're wizards that can fix everything immediately until
Yeah.
like something big happens, and then everybody just thinks we can fix everything immediately, and then we're just
Yeah.
like,
So I'm going to mention one thing that the three of us will be able to relate to, and for people in the chat or watching later that may not be familiar with this, I'll explain. And again, I agree with you, Anthony, in the sense that SolarWinds was a public deal. It became known that this
Yeah.
occurred, and maybe at your company, your breach isn't public, or it didn't affect as many, or however you want to say it. But what about the ridiculous use of way more privilege for databases that happens everywhere?
are you talking
And
about
we're just
giving
waiting.
excessive access to users that don't need it, or user groups that don't
You might
need
have,
it?
or even developers. Sometimes developers have too much permissions.
I mean, you might have 30 people who have sysadmin level access to all your SQL servers.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. And
Yeah.
it's not that you don't trust those 30 people. They might all be trustworthy, like
Or at
top
least
notch
like
trustworthy people.
20 of them.
You're not really doing anything if you haven't left a wear clause off your right? I mean, we've all done
I'm
that.
not even talking about that. I'm not talking about like the developer or somebody like delete stated they weren't supposed to. But that's a good, I mean, that's a legitimate example. It
Yep.
goes back to our temporal tables. But that's 30 opportunities for an outside malicious person to get access that they shouldn't have.
Mhm.
That's where that's what I mean specifically, is if you have that many people who have God privilege,
Yeah, just more pinch
that's just
points.
that much more opportunity for your business to be compromised.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what
I
I mean.
think, and that kind of falls in what we were talking about earlier, that we could probably have a whole session on that. Is what levels are correct for developers, what levels are correct for
For
end
sure.
users that are just needing to pull data. So I'm
Yeah.
sure that could be expounded into hours because I can talk about just an API is just build an API and here's how it would do that, and then you don't have to interact with the database at all. Like,
Yeah. I like SolarWinds, their server and application monitor and the database performance analyzer for a whole bunch of reasons. Now, DPA used to be called Confio Ignite. There was a company called Confio, and they had a product called Ignite. It was the monitoring service for SQL Server. And I think SolarWinds bought them a long time ago, actually, I think. The server and application monitor piece is wonderful because you get insight to all these Windows metrics, for performance monitoring metrics, perfmon metrics, and with that also SQL Server specific metrics that can tell you literally almost anything you would want to know from a metric standpoint. And it can be a lot, but if you understand perfmon and you understand, Windows perfmon, what those things mean, it can be super helpful. And one of the really cool things about SAM, SolarWinds Application Monitor, is even if you don't understand everything you're looking at, you can click and just hover your mouth over a particular metric, and it'll pop up the information about it. Or if you drill into a metric, you get a graph. It'll usually open another page.
Yeah.
And show you that same metric in a different way, but it gives you like 2 or 3 paragraphs on the screen of what is this metric, what does it mean, and when should you care? What ranges about this metric should you care about? So I felt like it was really a good educational tool as well, and it's great for. So SAM also does SQL Server monitoring. It's great if you have servers that you don't need like real deep level monitoring on, but you do need something monitoring it. Like, is it up? Is it healthy? What's the what's your free disk space and other things like that. If you need query level monitoring, like at a deep level, SAM does give you some query level monitoring, but DPA is a much deeper monitoring tool, and it's based on being able to show you what your query is weighted on. And as Anthony alluded to earlier, like in graphs, you get these really impressive graphs that show you in no uncertain terms exactly what your problems are or what your problem queries are. So
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm a
those
big
are.
fan of
What's that?
DPA actually. I'm actually a big fan of DPA. And I joke a little bit about, liking the graphs, but it's true. I can just pop that thing
Oh, yeah.
open. And because they did it in a way where I can look at it and I can see something's wrong just by looking, right? I
Yeah.
can see there's patterns in the way that you pick up during the day, and you can see when 1 hour is sticking up like the middle finger, and
Mhm.
the server's crying for help.
When it goes like this, and then it's like, like,
Yeah.
well, what happened?
Yeah. In fact,
Yeah.
not too long ago,
Or if
there
it doesn't go
was-
down, I guess would also be.
Yeah, not too long ago, there was a big push where I worked to stabilize it because all of a sudden all of it was out of whack, and that nice curve that we see day in day out, and it doesn't even really move on the weekends, was gone, and it was seemingly random. And eventually, I decided like we got to spend some time, and a couple of us actually took care of all those things because that noise makes it so you can't see what's going on.
Yeah.
But if I didn't have DPA, I wouldn't be able to see what's going on. So like that's my point. It's just like I joke about the graphs, but it is very helpful when you,
Yeah,
just look at
yeah.
something. I know in 5 seconds
100%.
something's wrong. I need to investigate.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that SolarWinds has alerting as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. It'll send you emails and do other things. I mean, you can use PowerShell with SolarWinds SAM
I
to
think
do
a lot
custom
of the
things.
emails I used to get where we all worked was from SolarWinds when like something drops or server needs more RAM or any kind of stuff like that. I
Drive
think
space issues.
yeah, space issues. I think it sent alerts for all that.
Yeah, because unlike other servers, SQL, SQL or database servers, um, especially SQL Server, you got to have a lot of extra space there, which isn't the case with other infrastructure. So us DBA types tend to have to keep a really good eye on that and get a heads up because, oh no, we're down below 8%. That can escalate quickly.
Yeah.
So then,
it can.
speaking of SolarWinds and monitoring services, have you used Grafana or Splunk?
So we have
Yes.
Grafana where I'm at now, and it looks really cool and interesting. I am struggling to learn how to use it.
Okay.
I would love
Um,
to hear more.
Partly because I haven't been able to spend as much time with Grafana as I would like.
Mhm.
Partly because some of my permissions aren't working, so I can't access certain
Yeah.
things or certain product lines that we have. I should be able to see stuff, but I can't. We talked about doing dashboarding at Grafana, but
It's Grafana dashboarding is amazing. Um,
yeah, yeah.
the look of it, at
Um,
least.
so you should also be able to do things. This came up recently at my work with you can do detailed SQL Server monitoring with AWS CloudWatch,
Okay.
and that sort of thing. I found an article, sent it to my boss, and said, "Hey, maybe we should check this out." That's as far as it went.
Yeah, and then the other one I use is I use Splunk, which is more for I have a
Logging?
dashboard. It's for logging, yeah. But I
Okay.
have a dashboard on Splunk that lets me know, since it's keeping track of all my logs, it's keeping track of all my errors, it's keeping track of everything because we log everything. So I can utilize that and make it. We have a dashboard that has like errors or calls dropped or things that didn't make it through and we got a bad return code, and then it actually graphs it out and tells us by I think by hour or by minute, whatever it is, um, when something's failing. Which it I use it as again mostly as a logging tool to look up logs when something breaks. I'm like, what's going on? Um, but I also keep it on a tab at all times so I can just pop over to the dashboard, make sure nothing's spiked, and okay, we're
Yeah,
good. Like it's fine. That does not have Splunk does have alerting. I don't know if we had to set it up separately or if it's built in, so I'm not exactly positive on that. But yeah,
yeah.
So I know. Oh, I think we all just kind of jumped at the same time.
everybody say something at once. Go.
So Cabana is what we have a lot of
Yeah.
logging in. And when I say we, it's almost exclusively application development. It's the software engineers. Um, I do have a lot of interest in getting as our data flows and our BI starts picking up and getting a little bit more modern, um, putting that logging in the same system. I kind of, and then the same thing for the SQL side stuff, the database stuff. A lot of learning is looking at dashboards that already exist that we've kind of already discussed, or getting emails. But I want to start getting that also logged into
Mm-hmm.
the tool, in this case, Cabana, where I work. That way, we can pull up that graph, have it up on a big screen, and it doesn't matter what part of the environment is having an issue, those graphs will start popping up. And I get kind of excited about that, right? We know something's wrong. Okay, now let's drill in. Oh, let's get the database people on this, or let's get the front end people on this, or let's get the mid tier people on this,
I
whatever.
I did always enjoy seeing like the big. I think there were 60-inch TVs or 80-inch TVs, whatever they were, the big TVs we had, um, that would rotate through all the. It'd go through like our iteration for the sprints. It'd go through our velocity and all that stuff. But then it would always go through the health checks and having
Yeah.
just the display that you can be like, oh, everything's good. And every now and then you look
Yeah,
over and be like, oh, what's going on? It's all red.
all red. Oh, Amazon. Oh no.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's all red.
Yeah.
we're more of an Azure. We're
Yeah, we
very
do.
Microsoft.
We do Azure for DevOps, so, which I am getting so much better at now because I don't have a choice.
That's the best way to learn. It's the best way to learn.
They're like,
Sink or swim.
yeah, like we need you to do this. I'm like, gotcha.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that, so
Yeah.
I start looking it up.
Quick Google search begins.
I
Yep.
kind of want to learn GitHub Actions at some point. I don't know when I'm gonna fit that in, but I don't know where we're going next. I'm not saying we are going somewhere next, but it seems like with Microsoft, there's always a somewhere next. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Once upon a time
The
there's
next
SSRS.
standard, I guess.
And now SSRS is kind of becoming Power BI, like behind the scenes. There's SSIS, and then now it's kind of ADF, is your data factory. So they
Mhm.
always have that going. And I wonder if, since they bought GitHub, if GitHub Actions will be the next thing that we end up doing. So
Or if
I like to,
GitHub's just gonna go downhill from here because you got blah blah blah.
I don't know, man. They as long as they keep pumping money
How
into it.
how's
And
Skype going for you guys?
I never heard of it. What's Skype? Just kidding.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think it
fair
uses the
enough.
same servers as Xbox game chat, so it's beautiful.
No,
I remember the day they bought that, and there's like the next day that everything started breaking. I'm like, what happened? Yeah,
That's funny.
it
Uh,
happens.
I had you mentioned a couple of things, Anthony, that could have made this list for me, which was SQL Server reporting services. I was actually into Power BI before Power BI was cool. Nice Barbara Mandrell reference there for all you country folks. Um,
Does
and
he talk about
then
Power BI?
can we?
No, I said, does he talk about Power BI?
Yes, this tells me that you don't
And
listen to classic country music, but that's okay, Grady. That's silly cool. She has a song called "I Was Country When Country Wasn't Cool."
oh, well, there you go.
uh,
Which is funny because
you hipsters.
yeah, I don't. I like country. I just
Yeah, yeah. So, and then the next thing, what kind of an honorable mention is it's I guess it's a favorite of mine, but I don't know it as well as I would like, which is integration services. SSIS seems so powerful,
Mhm.
but for me, well, a couple of things happened. So I took a class at a local training center here, and I loved the class. Of course, in class, everything works.
Yeah,
I
works
bought,
great. You go
Right.
home and you're like, what did I do?
yeah, exactly. So I bought a book, and I couldn't get very far in the book, and the examples didn't work. And I don't know if I ever looked at most tech books have some kind of like errata page where it keeps track of errors that made it into the book, and they give you fixes for stuff.
Yeah,
But I
it's like
never
an
made it very
update
far.
for our code, but you can't update a book that's printed. So
No,
they're like, we know this is in here. Just here's the answers.
yeah, just go over here and you'll get the actual code that really works.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I really I've kind of wanted to learn SSIS and get adept at it. I could be good with that particular technology. Just hasn't worked out for me. But
It's not like
um,
you have anything else going on right now, professionally or personally, that you know.
nah, I'm just you know
We've
loads of
said
free time.
yeah, we've said before, ABC or ABL, always be learning.
Yeah.
We have to, in our careers, it's up to us to make sure we stay up and let's stay in
Well,
touch.
but
But
wasn't that one
man,
of
that list gets
Lee's?
long.
Wasn't that one of Lee's New Year's resolutions though, to stop doing
Yeah,
so much?
and I'm still doing it. We're 6 days in, and it's still happening.
It's fair.
What about you guys? I mean, I've mentioned a few things. What are some of your favorite things that you worked with?
So I'll go. I'll agree with Rala. She brought up earlier in chat with Discord. So I have a couple that are more headphones going out. More technical, obviously, like stuff I use. But Discord is it's a daily for me that I always have open, and um, found a lot of good friends through there. Play all my video games, connections, connecting to chat and stuff through there. And I mean, hell, we have our own Discord here. It's such a wide, versatile tool that can be used for a lot of different types of platforms. Um, I have ones that are strictly professional. I have ones that are for gaming. There's every aspect of it. But it's
It
a
does
great place.
surprisingly well. It's surprisingly well with multiple organizations, like you just said. You got a couple different groups,
Yeah,
professionally and personally, and yada yada yada. Not all are good about that. Like the way it does it, it has a little tab on the left side of the screen, and you have your different groups. But
yeah, you can
some
folder
other
them.
other chat tools are really bad about it. Some of them are very personal based, like if you go into your Facebook Messenger or something or a group me, there's
Yeah,
just all the people, and if you're in more than 4 or 5, those tools just are really hard to manage.
Yeah. Well, it's like Slack. We all use Slack too. Slack's great, but there's something about Discord that I don't know. It brings more of a I don't know, like a personal aspect, I guess. Like it just gives you that feeling of like this is a well-rounded program that is doing what I want it to do, and I don't have to fight with it very much. Even in Slack, sometimes I have to fight to get to it to do something I want because I didn't think about it, or like they have huddles now in Slack, but you can't do video in a huddle, even though you can all talk to each other and you can share screens, but there's no video. That always throws me off.
A recent training program I was in, they use Discord for everything. So you just click a button and then one of the people were presenting. It's kind of like a Zoom call. All of a sudden, you're just in Discord.
Yeah, Discord does a great job with video and streaming and sharing screens.
And then when we break out and like we go into little cohorts or whatever, room 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
Someone's like, hey, Jimmy, screen share. Susie, help him out, and then I was impressed. I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. I thought Discord was just a bunch of gamers being like, yo, dog. But I
think that's what it started as.
Tool. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what got it popular. And then after all these gamers started talking to each other, we're like, a lot of us are in the similar fields and similar like-minded that most of the time we're not even talking about games anymore. It's like we're doing stuff like this.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one of mine. Definitely found some cool people on there, and Rala being one of them, and Kaneo being one of them. But yeah. But as far as technology goes that I use on a daily, the Splunk, as I was talking about earlier, is up there for just how much it makes my life easier doing my job. Knowing that, if I get an error, I know that I can go to the log and pull everything about that error. Enough so that pretty much that's maybe it cuts it down to maybe 3 steps to find the problem as opposed to like 10 without it. If there's no logging, finding a problem it's pain. So
or impossible.
Or we've all been before where you have an intermittent problem and someone comes up and they say, hey, this happened, and you're like, that sucks, we need to get that fixed. What did you do to make that happen? Nothing. Okay, you're lying to me, but we need to figure out.
You may not know it.
You did something. You just don't know what you did, and that's fine. But without any way to know that, and it's intermittent, so we see it maybe once a month.
Those are the worst.
I'm like, I can't fix it because I can't reproduce it. But when I have a whole extensive log on it, because she said, oh, it happened around 2, and then I can pull her username or her login ID. Like, oh, well, at 2 o'clock, here's what happened. Oh, you changed this value, which doesn't, it's not compatible with this other value. We just don't have a program to not have both selected, something like that. And it just, then I'm like, oh, well, that's an easy 2-line change, as opposed to I'm going to beat my head against the wall for the next 6 months because this one problem keeps happening once a month.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when you end up with processes that like people just reboot or bounce servers once a week or every night something bounces the server. So like everything just works better as long as you bounce it on a regular basis because what's going wrong is just a mystery.
We actually used Grafana to solve a similar problem. You're talking about bouncing servers. It was a very easily recognizable pattern that was signifying a data, not a data leak, but like a memory leak. So we'd watch our Grafana server, and we'd be able to see it climb, 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 and then on reset, because we have a nightly reset of our servers, it would drop back down, and then it would climb over the whole day, and it just climbs so steady enough that if you just look at it, you're like, I don't know, it's just using a little more because it was so widespread over 24 hours.
Yeah.
But when you look at the beginning versus the end, there was a lot of memory leak, and we were able to pinpoint where it was happening and why it was happening because of the graphs in Grafana, which was kind of cool.
Nice.
Oh yeah, insight's always a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Anthony? Do you have some favorites that you really like to use?
Yeah, I guess I'll start off with one of my favorite little ones. Visual Studio Code always seems to impress me, and it's not big and it's not heavy, but I can open up just about anything. And I do on a daily basis.
Mhm.
Even when I was fully doing the DBA thing, there'd always be a reason to look at something in Visual Studio Code. You open up something and it goes, I use this term a lot. Yo, dog, this looks like a Python script. Yo, hey, this is Java. Hey, do you want me to,
Mhm.
treat it as such? And then you have the syntax highlighting, you have everything that you would expect. And then let's say it is one of those programs that you compile or you have to run. It's the scripts. You can a few clicks away from. Doesn't matter what language. It seems like like today I haven't been doing Python in a while, and I need to jump into Python, and I'm on my desktop, open up Visual Studio Code, and it's like this is Python. 2 clicks later, it's running the code.
Yep.
And I don't know how much you've had to deal with this, Lee, but O'Grady, I'm sure you know the pain when all of a sudden you jump into something you don't normally do and you don't have IDE set up. Saying that IDE is such a time sink. You got libraries you got to bring in. You got this SDK.
Yeah, clone your repositories and
Yeah, you got
do all
everything.
kinds of
You got
stuff.
everything ready, and you go to run it, and then you're just getting these obnoxious errors.
Yeah.
It's like, why is the first 1% of this task taking 24 hours? But anyway,
Yeah.
my point is, it just seems like a whole bunch of people have put a lot of love, a whole lot of community have put a lot of love in Visual Studio Code, and
Yeah.
when I just need to pop something open and get something done, I can. So
Nice.
So I will have two things to say about that. So as a .NET Core developer, I don't use VS Code very much because in my mind, VS Code, the only time I use it is when I'm doing Angular development because it's just a lot more manageable. That being said, I'm usually using Visual Studio proper.
Yeah.
And
it's hard to argue against that.
And it's hard for me being so comfortable in Visual Studio now to be like, oh, I'm gonna open in VS Code. I'm like, no, it's open in Visual Studio, unless it's Angular, because it's just a pain in Visual Studio.
No, 100% agreement for me. Like I'm saying Visual Studio's code because it's just like it can handle just about anything real quick. But you're gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard to find anyone who says I hate doing C#, I hate doing .NET in Visual Studio proper. It is.
I will say
expensive for a reason.
I use
it's
it
probably the best IDE for that.
I use it instead of Notepad C++ a lot of time, or Notepad++ a lot of time. Instead of opening up a Java file or whatever I'm looking at in Visual Studio, if I know I just need to look through it and I don't need to make changes or anything like that, I'll open in VS Code because it takes 5 seconds to open as opposed to loading Visual Studio. I think I'm on 2019. That takes a couple minutes to load up, and then you have to get the project and you have to make sure it's in there. So a lot of times I'll just use Visual Studio Code.
What's the difference between Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code?
You want to go first?
A lot. Well, I'm just saying. It's in my mind, I feel like they shouldn't even be called Visual Studio together. They're like very different applications. If you are strong in Visual Studio proper, that doesn't mean that you know how to use VS Code either. They're like that different of application.
Okay.
Yeah, Visual Studio is and there's different editions. It is the Microsoft flagship IDE. It has tons of features. It has code completion, the handful of languages it's meant for. IntelliSense. Thank you.
I know
Even
you're
now
looking
they
for
use Yeah. Even now they have what's it called, Copilot, where you start typing code and it uses, AI and machine learning and all that.
Yeah.
But it looked at all the code on GitHub, which that could trigger a conversation alone. And so now it can predict what you're probably going to type next and suggest it. So unlike IntelliSense, where you type in the first couple letters and then it's like, oh, do you mean this word? It's like, oh, I see you start off your method this way. Are you going to try to do all this? And bloop, there's your code.
And then it's pretty much, are you trying to do this as as a project altogether? Yeah. Do you want to build the rest of this class for you? You're like, I will let you try. And then it does it. And you're like, oh, okay.
And then so it's the whole yacht, right? So I have my code running. I can see, I run my code locally and I can see, performance monitoring. So like us in the database world, we have these special monitoring tools to watch it. Well, imagine if you run a SQL code locally and then it'll say, hey, here's your wait times. Here's this. Here's what your CPU is doing right now. Visual Studio has all of that. It's a big deal. And again, even open source people, well, some of them might be kind of biased, but there's a lot of people use open source tools, but still pay for Visual Studio proper.
Okay.
Now, core.
Dunce just brought a good point up we need to talk about after this, but go ahead.
Okay. So Visual Studio Code is I would argue is completely different. It is just an IDE for whatever you're going to do. It's not meant to be a replacement or anything to Visual Studio proper. So you open up a document and you can do some editing, or you can treat it like you can open a folder like it's a project and it can do that. But then it's open source, so the community can add whatever. So when a new language comes out or a new way of doing things comes out, you can just pull in that. Should I call it a plugin? I'm not sure what to call it now for some reason. But you basically download the plugin, and now it knows Python. Now it knows you can do C#, and I've compiled C# in there. You can do whatever, and then all these features are just there at your fingertips.
Do you do NuGet packages on VS Code, or is that only in Visual Studio?
I'm sure you can, but I don't know. I've done that.
That's where we get most of our stuff. We build out and use NuGet packages.
Our .NET core is our .NET core is definitely Visual Studio. Yeah. And we use NuGet and all that.
It sounds really similar, except that you're telling me it's open source, which allows people to build things that can be sucked into it as a plugin, and suddenly it knows how to do X, Y, and Z, which Visual Studio Professional does not do.
And that's like me saying, oh, so explain to me SQL Server, you talk, and I go, so it's exactly the same as all the databases, except it has temporal tables.
So it's just like Oracle. Gotcha. Okay.
It's exactly the same thing.
That's what...
No, I'm just trying to illustrate a point, right? Like
that was my oversimplified summary of what I heard.
No, yeah, I mean that's
one tool is very good at a couple things, and the other one is not supposed to be a replacement. It's like almost like it started out as like simple script management, and it became very powerful at just about everything.
I say, hell, in Visual Studio, I've ran SQL. I mean, you can do SQL management in Visual Studio.
And you can open up in almost any operating system.
Yeah, it's
doesn't matter if you're on Linux, Mac, whatever.
Powerful.
Yeah. Well, back in the day, when I was doing SSRS, they had this thing called BIDS.
There are only 48 stars on the
Business Intelligence Development Studio. Basically, it's a shell for Visual Studio meant to do business intelligence reporting services stuff. So
the grandfather to STDT or something like that.
Yeah, I never used Visual Studio like you guys did, but there was a form of it that I did work with at one time. So it sounded like Visual Studio Code, you kind of got to it there at the end, I think, was developed to do or to handle, some, I don't want to say lower level, that's not, but to handle scripting in a way that Visual Studio Professional wasn't necessarily designed to do.
Yeah, it's also good for just, I don't know, like I said, I use it in Angular. It just makes a lot more sense to use VS Code when you're writing in Angular.
Because you can download,
I don't know why.
You can download the plugins and it just handles all those different scripts.
Yeah, it's all like just ready for it. So you don't, and if I want to do it in Visual Studio, it requires a lot more prep work.
Because it's a bigger tool.
Yeah. which
one's
Visual
Dunce's
Studio
jackhammer.
question.
is awesome.
Oh,
but it's
Dunce. I'm sorry.
oh yeah. So
Sorry.
Dunce was talking about a GPT-3, and that's the AI writing code for you in normal syntax. So yeah, how do you feel about that?
Can someone explain to me what Amazon data stuff NFL uses, like natural language processing? What are they doing? Because I feel like I need to know more about what they're doing before I can comment on that. Or do you just want to comment on the low code stuff that I feel like this
I
might be
know
leading
of
to?
right now. I know they've been using it for articles and like reports and stuff like that that are able to be AI generated. I guess you can say. Maybe that's what the NFL is using it for.
Is it like
Articles.
the announcers talking, blah, 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 and then the tools listening and saying, well, you mentioned, I don't know, football players, Joe.
Yes.
So here's some stats about Joe. Oh, and they're playing against the insert football team here.
And then
Playing against the
spit out a
Rams.
story
The Rams
about
still
it.
exist, right?
Yeah, I think
It's
we need
not
more
in here.
information, Dunce.
I will
I think
comment on just
it's an
general.
OpenAI.
Okay, so language, so the natural language processing will replace SQL stuff? Absolutely not. Low code in general will replace a lot of what the people on this call do? No, it will not. That's my opinion. We use low code at my employer now. In fact, my team includes that, and it's very powerful for certain things. But it's not going to replace anything. It's kind of like saying, "Oh, SSIS is really good," which it is. It's going to replace all the need to do anything in SQL.
Yeah.
No, I mean, there's tools are good at certain things, and they have their
Right.
benefits,
Mhm.
and they will all exist. It's just I know it's buzzworthy, and I know people love the idea that you can literally just grab the UPS driver and bring him in and say, "Talk to my computer," and then the computer's gonna be able to write code for you. It's
And I
not.
think it will replace some of the. Or let me redo this
Just
whole
don't use the
sentence.
word replace, and
Yeah,
I'll probably
let me redo the sentence. It's not going to replace
Yeah.
anything, but it will give more access to people who don't know how to program to get them into this world.
100%. I
Which
can
I
completely agree
am,
with that.
if anything, hopeful for, because then I get more people to work with me that can build stuff. But overall, we've talked about this in the past. I've talked about this with people. I don't know if I've talked about it with you guys. About AI replacing programmers in general. And the problem is that it has come a long way and it's doing some amazing things. But the processes that it takes for me to sit down on a computer and sort through a problem, not a bug, but a problem that they want something added to an application, or they want an application that does a certain thing. There's a lot of business logic that can go into this that isn't tangible. It's not even able to truly be explained like while you're doing it, because it's a thought process, like why certain things are happening this way. Well, it may never have happened like that before, and it may never happen like that again, but in this case scenario, this is happening this way for this reason. And I think those are the parts that will guarantee a job for developers for forever, because until AI can do proper thought logic without I'll say that, like without the
Until it starts having
computer side of it.
creativity, it needs creativity and the ability to read in between the lines.
Yeah.
We don't have
honestly.
that yet.
Yeah,
And if you could give me
creativity
an
and thinking
example,
outside the box, which the box is the AI. So it's like,
yeah, yeah, and then a lot of times when I say that, someone will counter with, "Well, this robot at MIT or this company in Japan can do it." Yeah, but my phone can't, and until my phone can, it's not taking over anything, right?
okay.
So
So I see what
we
Dunce
got
is
to
saying
answer.
here.
Yeah, so I'd love to respond to that.
Mhm.
At least correct. I see that Lee responded. But yeah, so somebody in the natural language processing, they say who threw the most touchdown passes in the red zone the first 7 minutes games played after 2 p.m. And like Lee responded in text, something's turning that into SQL.
Yeah,
That's valuable. That allows a lot of people to do something.
Mhm.
But in the end, that's not why we have a job. No one on this call is their job is to find out little facts like that.
Yeah.
This has
That's
been
like saying
done
Power BI
over.
is going to replace development,
Yeah.
because technically Power BI can do a lot of the stuff we can do in development, but it it's just a option.
It's
It's
just good.
just
It's good at a certain type of reporting.
yes.
Yeah. So once upon a time, when you went to develop, you had to develop in C++ or C. Before that, you had to develop in machine code, and you had to know exactly what CPU you're coding against. And then they invented better compilers that let you use C and C++ instead. And then they invented other things that let you do just-in-time programming. And then they invented other things that were going to replace all the
Fortran.
job. Fortran, woo, COBOL. But then eventually they invented
Cold
things
Fusion. Wait.
like Java, where there's a secret sauce. You can write it once and run it anywhere, right?
Mhm.
And every time one of these technologies come out, people talk about like it's going to make it so we don't need engineers and we can just have script kiddies do it. And now we can just have business people do it. We saw that access the database. It's everywhere. Lots of business run on it.
Yeah.
I really shouldn't knock it, but what I should knock is the fact that they thought that it could do anything, and there's things it still can't do. And the more and more that this stuff encroaches on the hard stuff, the better it is, the more of a win it is. Kind of like the use case that Dunn's shared. It's a good thing, but it can't eat everything. And I don't care how much those salespeople say,
Yeah.
no code will do everything. We have no code. It's successful at as long as we point at tasks that it actually is meant
Well,
for.
and as developers or IT in general, we are also self-preserving. So by the time it would replace me, I'll be retired. So whatever.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, so
no one's gonna write something to replace themselves.
So one of the things, go ahead, Anthony.
okay, so I guess I'll just do one more thing on that subject real quick. So this has happened already. I'm not trying to trigger Lee, but I might. This has happened already in the development world, right? Writing SQL, quote unquote, is hard. Being a software developer who's really good at the front end and the mid tier and technically the back end is a very difficult thing to do. And a lot of times not a lot of times, what has happened is they've created ORMs to handle that. So the developer, the engineer, doesn't have to write strict SQL. They can just use the ORM of choice and it will handle the SQL stuff for them. And 90% of the time, that's fine. Well, but let's be honest though, like 90% of the time it works. It's the reason why I mentioned the triggering and the reason why you do the quotes is because sometimes it fails horribly, right? Sometimes they just want to do 2 or 3 things. The ORM isn't quite sure what they mean. And then it writes this horrendous query that's translating everything, bringing everything in, and they have to talk to their database developer or their DBA more likely and say, what's going on, or they don't even notice and your server's on fire and you have to say something, right?
Yeah.
That's my point. This will cover, if no code can cover 20%, 30% of the needs of the business, great. They're always going to be that fire. There's always going to be that problem. It's too hard for it to solve, and they're going to need engineers. And I'll get off my soapbox.
No, I 100% agree with that. That's, I mean, all it is, it's gonna be a tool for us to use. Now, will it replace some people? It'll replace people that don't want to move forward, which is, we've all seen that. There's people stuck in a certain technology. They're really good at it, but then that technology phases out and they don't move on with it. They're either stuck at a company maintaining old technology.
Silverlight.
Yeah. Or they, learn new technique, they adapt and they move forward to, to a new technology. I mean, hell, look at me. I'm sitting here not doing at all what I was doing last year, technology wise. So,
yeah.
Lee, what were you going to say before I got my soapbox?
No, it's what you said is completely relevant. So it goes back to 2 things actually. So I made a comment about entity framework, and then you and I just hosted a speaker last night whose topic's completely relevant to this subject. So we had at our SQL Server meetup a lady by the name of Deepthi Goguri, who is a SQL Server database administrator, and she presented on the fact that her company, I guess last year maybe, came in and announced that they were going to go to cloud, and she was terrified. She was like, I won't have a job. And I think that's
Yeah.
a huge myth, and she busted that myth, and she talked about how cloud changes a database administrator's role, but the database administrator not going to go away. Like, you still need one.
Yeah.
It just looks a little different, but 80% of what you do, particularly in certain areas of your job, transfers. Entity framework, ORMs work great until they don't.
Right. And then you have your job.
Yeah.
Right.
Then
And
we need a
until you,
developer. We need a. Or we need a.
yeah, you need a SQL developer who
Yeah.
actually like knows how to write good queries, or you have a host of databases and most of them are slow and you don't know why, so you put up a job posting and you hire someone, that sort of stuff. So that's all I was going to say.
Yeah.
Every new thing that comes out, it's always going to swallow whatever came before it, and almost never does.
And honestly, what the ones that stick around, like the example that Dunce gave and the SQL stuff, it's usually the boring stuff.
Mhm.
Like, correct me if I'm wrong, Lee, you probably don't want to have 75 requests for who has thrown the most touchdown pass in the red zone in the first 7 minutes.
Yeah.
You
That
probably
is an
don't
intriguing question, but no.
the first time.
So,
Yes,
so I'm
the first
assuming
time.
this GTP3 is taking that, it's finding keywords and saying, I mean, the AI would be great at that, finding those keywords and
Yeah.
taking those and saying, okay, well, they're asking this. They can break it out into a parameterized sentence saying, I'm passing these parameters to SQL. I need the information back. And then it might even look at it again and say, I have the information back. Now, which of these results makes sense? You know,
it figures out what the subject is.
yeah.
and it
If
figures out
one
what
of
the
the
predicate
if one of
is.
the answers is like a number, they'll just throw that one away. You know, it's stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's taking that and then passing it somewhere. It's not just doing it. And even
Yeah,
if
and
it is, we're gonna have to have developers to maintain AI. I mean,
Yeah,
there's
that's
always,
also true.
There's always that argument of who do you think's building the programs?
We don't have to write a symbol anymore, but we have to write, SQL or .NET or
Yeah.
Scala. So
Or we'll be sitting there being like, okay, I need to create a class, and we just say it and it just creates a class. I would love that. Are you serious?
yeah,
Yeah, that would be great.
Make a new
So I
regex that
think-
just only accepts numbers and letters. Go, and then it just does it. Don't have to
talk
look
about
it up.
regex, super powerful, but we always have to Google how the heck to use it.
Everything. Well, you look at any regex
Yeah,
and you're like,
yeah.
Numbers
Looks like a
slash
cat walking on a
star
keyboard.
bracket.
It looks like a cat walking a keyboard.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. But I mean, you can't.
It's
no,
so
never gonna go
powerful. I
away.
love them. Hell,
Yeah.
actually, no. That's one of mine. Regexes.
That's yours, regex.
That's one of my favorite technologies.
Yeah.
It should be one of
Oh, we
yours too,
definitely-
because that's what prevents us from putting bad characters into your database. So
I'm all for that.
there you go.
I'm all for that. So I'll say one more thing and we can kind of move toward wrapping up.
Yeah.
I hate regex. is what
Regex
Don
hates you,
says.
Duns.
Well, so I've seen a lot of, or I've seen some, I shouldn't say a lot. I've seen some books that are T-SQL books that will teach you T-SQL using the kind of question that Dunt's asked. And they'll take that question and then they'll break it apart and show you what a T-SQL statement would look like that would answer that question. And so, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's cool that AWS and NFL are doing that sort of thing. I don't think it's going to replace. I don't think it's going to replace everything.
And I was
even mostly.
joking about coding in AI, but we were just talking about that. Like, we are already at the point where AI is integrating into Visual Studio and being able to say, dot, are you trying to make a method? You're like, oh, yes, complete it for me, thank you. Or even like the getters and setters. At least I know Eclipse did on Visual Studio.
Almost
I don't even have to do that
always-
because it does it for me.
It realizes almost
Yeah.
always when you reference this record that you do these getters and setters, and
Mhm.
hey, you're gonna want to convert it in a second. So
Yeah.
it's exciting stuff. It really is. But on that note, O'Grady, do you already have someone picked out to raid? Because I can do some closing remarks while you search.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll find someone here.
All right, awesome. Because as we typically do, we like to raid somebody on Twitch.
And we really need to start branching out a little bit to find some more similar topic type people to start doing some raids on, because
That sounds something we should outsource to our community. So we got several people on our Discord, we got several
do
people on our
that.
chat. So if you guys or the people on YouTube who are going to see this later want to, we'd really appreciate it. Let us know if there's other talks like this. If you're listening to us, my guess is you might be listening to someone else. So let us know. We'd probably like to raid them. Um, and then I mentioned YouTube, so it's that time of the night. We do have a YouTube channel, also called Ready Set Data. Every Thursday we stream, but every Thursday morning before the stream, one of our previous videos come out. So watch for that. And then, so if you miss something, if there's a previous video like imposter syndrome seems to be very popular,
has that video? I
check it
I
out.
have not looked at any of the likes, but I have talked to a couple people that have DM'd me in Discord talking about the imposter syndrome, and that it was that they liked the
Yeah, I don't
message
know
we
any
put
of the
across, I guess.
stats. Yeah, but so yeah, so check us out on YouTube. If you want to slap subscribe, like the videos, that'd be great. Do some commenting. And of course, always check us out here on Thursdays. And if everyone's interested, I think we've talked more than once about maybe having extra videos over here and there. So let us know. And as mentioned, check us out on Discord. And do you have someone?
Yeah, I do. And I also dropped
Right.
our Twitters in there. Make sure you go check us out to find out if
Oh
we
yeah,
are not streaming a certain week, like we didn't stream a couple weeks ago for the holidays. Um,
yeah.
Spirit, you got
Twitter
here
sphere.
just in time
Hit
for
us
us to
out.
leave. So so yeah, go hit us up, and then yeah, I'll make a channel in Discord. We'll put recommendations, maybe Twitch recommendations or YouTube recommendations of people that are like kind of that would fit in our community type setup here, podcasts or tech talks, something like that. So we'll make one on there. So yeah, we're gonna raid Leb.
Sorry,
He's
Spirit.
he's a good dude. He's playing what is he playing right now? Oh, he's playing The Witcher right
Parcheesi.
now.
That's close.
So we'll go check him out. He has a really cool a cool feature on his stream that whenever someone raids him, it shows like a clip of one of their previous videos. I think I've seen it a couple places,
Icon.
but so it's yeah. All right, well we will catch you all next week, same time. And yeah,
Same
anybody have
bat
anything before we
time.
take off?
All right. Thank you.
Nope. Hit
Very
us
good.
up.
All right,
Bye.
we will catch you all later.
Bye.